dating this secure person made me so much more secure, where I broke out of the anxious avoidant loop. I got over the silly Burning Man guy, and I understood what a secure relationship was like. And I feel so lucky to be in this secure marriage. And sometimes when I think about my career success, I'm like, I couldn't have done it without my husband, not because he's involved with my career, but I really feel like 25 to 50% of my brain was in these spirals, worrying about people, being anxiously attached, ruminating on them, and just being in a secure relationship actually gives you a lot of peace, and you can use that brain power for something else.
But only 50% of people you said are the secure ones that everybody wants.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's a combination of you can become more secure yourself, or you can find a secure partner. What's hard is that we often confuse secure people for boring.
That's what I was going to say. I wasn't sure whether to say it, but secure sounds a bit, wallpaper.
Yes, and that's what people don't understand. So people think, oh, like I had a client who said to me, I went on a date with this guy. We went out a few times. I told him I was going to Seattle, and then he sent me all these recommendations for Seattle, so I'm never going to see him again. I was like,
what are you talking about?
She's like, that's so desperate. I was like, this is just a nice guy who's trying to tell you about a cool bookstore in Seattle. Like, why can't you see that as somebody that's interested in you and putting in effort? But to her, in the anxious avoidant loop, what she wanted was someone who was unavailable. And that's what's so hard. I feel like there's all these lovely, securely attached people out there that are probably like, oh, I'm a dud. Nobody wants me. It's like, baby, somebody wants you. They just haven't figured it out yet. And so some of the work that I do is train people to look for secure partners. And so things like, are they consistent? Do they not play games? Are they clear about their interest in you? And so we actually have to understand that securely attached partners are the heroes of the relationship world. And they're great to be in relationships with. They have healthier relationships. And you have to train yourself to go for that and to break out of this anxious avoidant loop.
I could probably hazard a guess as to which attachment style ends up in marriage the most and stays in marriage. But I'm also quite curious about which attachment style is most likely to get the most attention. Mm-hmm. Because from what we've just talked about there is a hint of vanilla to the person. There is a hint of vanilla to the secure attachment style. And there's a hint of excitement associated with the avoidant attached style. Because one of the principles I learned about attraction is this idea of social proofing, and one element of social proofing is not appearing to be so interested, because that raises the perception of your value. So if we're having a conversation, if I'm kind of blasé about you and a little bit uninterested, it raises my social value. Therefore, you'll think I'm maybe more valuable.
Yeah.
So I was thinking maybe these avoidant attached people are getting the most sort of short-term interest. I don't know, is that?
I think that's exactly right. And even when you said that, it reminded me of how I felt with the Burning Man guy, where the story in my head was, if you don't want me, you must be better than me. I think so many of us feel that way. It's like, well, as soon as you reject me, you have more power than me. And for me to regain power, I want to get you interested in me, instead of a much healthier mindset, which is, I want the person I choose to choose me back. That's how I know that we're a match. So I want to tell you about this interesting application of research. So the term fuckboy has been around for a little while. And people kept asking me, what's going on with fuckboys? Why do I keep falling for fuckboys? There's Fuckboy Island. There's all this stuff. And I was like, why are people so addicted to fuckboys? And so there's this really interesting research from the psychologist B.F. Skinner. And it's a study with pigeons. So for the first pigeon, the pigeon is in a little cage with a lever. Every time that the pigeon presses the lever, food comes out. And so that's pigeon number 1. Then there's pigeon number 2. They're also in a cage with a lever. In the beginning, every time that they press the lever, food comes out. Okay, so now they're the same. But then the first pigeon, it stays the same. They press the lever, food comes out. And this is called the continuous reward schedule. The second pigeon, over time, the schedule changes. Sometimes when they press the lever, food comes out. Sometimes when they press it, it doesn't come out. Maybe it might take them 5 or 20 times of pressing it for the food to come out. And that's called the partial reward schedule. So with the first pigeon, once they turn off the food, the pigeon will press it a few more times, see there's no more food, and stop pressing it. The second pigeon once they turn off the food, it will literally keep pressing the lever until it collapses from fatigue. And that's because the partial reward schedule is so addictive. That's also how slot machines work. That's how gambling works. Sometimes I get what I want and sometimes I don't. So I want to keep trying and I want to keep trying. And that's what's happening with fuckboys. So fuckboys give you attention in the beginning, right? You get what you want. They seem interested in you. You go out. Then they start pulling back. They're hot and cold. Sometimes they're interested, sometimes they're not. And you become addicted to that partial reward schedule. Well, this time when I press the lever, will you text me back or not? And it feels really exciting. And so securely attached partners are the levers in the first one, where their interest in you and their love in you is continuous. And that's what we should go after, because that's what a healthy relationship is. But people get so addicted to the fuckboys and to the partial reward schedule that they're trapped in this cycle. And so our brains are really develop in this way where when we don't know if we'll get what we want or not, it's really exciting. But that's not what's aligned with long-term relationship success.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Tell me about you. I feel like from listening to your episodes, I was like, this is an avoidant attached maximizer. This is a reformed fuckboy. But what was the dynamic like with you and your girlfriend?
So for the first 25 years of my life, I was the avoidant. Again, grew up in a house, I've said this a million times, but grew up in a household where I thought relationships were prison. I ran from everybody that was interested in me. And then I met a person who was, I would say she sits somewhere between being secure, but also anxiously attached. She has hints of both.
I get that.
Where she's a really calm communicator and she can just like your husband. If there's a problem, like, we should talk about it.
Yeah.
We should sit down and have a conversation about it, not scream at each other, not get agitated. And being with her slowly eased me out of my cycle. It's still there and it still can be triggered. And when it gets triggered, this is how it looks. And this is how I know she's a bit of an anxious attached. We'll be on a date on Saturday. I will stop paying attention to her in some way. She will then increase the amount of need she has of my attention.
Yeah.
She'll start kind of like pecking.
Yeah.
Because she's seen that she's no longer getting my attention.
Yeah.
Then she goes really, really quiet. Because she's now really annoyed.
Yeah.
Because she lost my attention.
Yeah.
I then see she's annoyed.
Yeah.
I don't want to argue, but I want to know why she's annoyed. I ask her why she's annoyed. She basically explains that I did something 7 minutes ago that made her feel whatever. We kind of get into it a little bit and I want to leave. I want to like get my stuff and go to a hotel. And I have to say in my head, don't leave the house, don't leave the house, don't leave the house. And at that point, what she wants to do is she wants to chase. And this is kind of like a toxic combination because I'm trying to get out the front door and she wants to solve it and wants me to be even closer. So it's almost like when we both get triggered together, she gets increasingly needy and I want to run.
Yeah, you really just described the anxious avoidant loop. And it's exactly that. It's like she feels disconnected from you, so she wants to reattach.
Yeah.
And you feel smothered or trapped, and so you need space.
Exactly.
And then it's not that your relationship is doomed in any way. It's that you just have to learn how to both regulate your emotions. And so for you, it might be saying, I see that you're really upset. Obviously something happened that went wrong. I need a few minutes to regulate. And so in that moment, you're experiencing flooding where your cortisol is rising and you actually are in fight or flight mode. And this is a really common thing in fights, is that people don't take enough breaks. So if you at all feel like you're flooding, you can ask for a break, but it's not saying this isn't important to me. It's not saying we're never going to talk about this. It's just saying, I actually can't have this conversation in this moment with where my head is at. And for her, it's also understanding, what did you do that triggered her and what could she do in that moment differently? And so we talked about the strategies for avoidant attached, but I can also talk about the strategies for anxious attached. So for example, distracting yourself, going for a walk, going to the movies, doing something else, texting a friend and saying, I really want to text the guy I'm interested in, but he hasn't texted me back, so I'm texting you instead. Or something called disconfirming evidence, which is a fancy way of saying, basically, what's the alternative here? So the story in your head is, I texted him a meme this morning. He hasn't texted me back. He usually texts me back right away. clearly he's not interested and he's met someone else. Disconfirming evidence would be maybe he has a really busy week at work. He mentioned that he has a big project, or perhaps he's not feeling well. What are the other reasons that he could not be getting in touch with you? And it's about not creating a problem before you know there's a real problem. And so both of you could work on those different strategies so that you can have this healthy relationship and that you're not constantly in what you called that toxic cycle of she's chasing and you're running.
Yeah, and I agree. She's by far, I'm not just saying this because she probably is going to listen. I'll probably send her the episode because I always do. By far the best relationship I've ever had in my entire life, and I will 100% marry her as soon as she says yes.
Yay.
But we do have that loop.
But one thing that's interesting, so I know about this from reading about it online, it sounds like you were dating and then you broke up and then you went to Bali to chase her.
Yes, this is true, stalker.
And so, right? So when I hear that, I'm like, oh, there's something in the dynamic where you as an avoidant attached person, you doing the chasing, that was breaking a pattern for you. And so what was going on with that?
Interesting, yeah. So we were together for about 2 years. It wasn't a great relationship in hindsight at that point, because we were clearly quite immature. And then we're lying in bed in Paris and she turns to me and says, she says something along the lines of, I don't like having sex with you. And I didn't really know what that meant. Like I'm a young guy, I'm like 25, 26 years old. No one's ever said that to me before. I think I'm,
You're like, I'm a stud.
I'm like, yeah, what do you mean? I was like, I've always got compliments. Does that mean that I'm bad in bed? What does that mean?
Yeah.
Really emasculating thing to hear. And so very quickly after that, we broke up and then we were separated. In that time, COVID rolls around. She's not feeling great in lockdown. She knows that because of that incident, but also just how she's feeling in her life anyway, the depression, all those kinds of things. Something's not right. She needs to go. She spends the next 2 years living in Bali. But so a year after the date when we broke up, I had, looked at what else was out there. And I think part of me had realized that that is the best person I'm ever going to meet. I say it to my friends all the time. I say, I cannot find a better person. And I think I'd had that realization that this was maybe the best person I'll ever meet. And so I made a plan. I got on a plane. I flew to Bali and went there really with the aim of apologizing, but low-key the aim was to get her back in some way. Went and apologized. She just wasn't interested in me. She wasn't rude. She was really sweet and nice. There was no romantic interest in me whatsoever. And then I'm there for 4 weeks in total, staying at the other side of the island with a friend of mine. And then in the last week of my trip to Bali, my sort of apology tour, things slowly start to change. And it actually happened when I said to her, I'm going back to the UK. And it's been lovely being here with you. I sent her a nice text message and said, you're doing really well. I'm so proud of the progress you're making on yourself and stuff. And then the next day she texts me saying, can I see you before I go? Part of me is thinking, I've been here for 3.5 weeks. You've shown no interest in me whatsoever. Maybe this is my last chance at victory. I'll just tell her to F off. And again, my mature brain, for whatever reason, showed up and said, of course you can see me before you go. And it was in those last 48 hours that everything changed.